Now that we've talked a little bit about how to start a part, how to start a sketch, and how to choose the sketch plane, I'd like to quickly go over a few of the sketch tools that we'll be working with throughout the course, beginning with the Line tool. The Line tool can be activated from the Sketch toolbar. I'll enable it, and when I do, you can see in the graphics area that the cursor now appears as a pencil with a line next to it, meaning that we are in Insert Line mode. With the Line tools active, I'll click anywhere to start sketching the line. I'll click and release the mouse to sketch the first point, and click again for the end point. When I move my cursor, you can see that SolidWorks is actually creating a chain of lines. This is convenient because oftentimes you want to create a complete chain of lines to eventually make up a closed profile. Once I click on the last endpoint, you can see the chain of lines is closed. Notice that by default, closed sketch contours like the shape you see here are shaded. This makes it easy to click and drag the shaded area to move the geometry. You can always turn this functionality on and off by going to the Tools drop-down menu and under Sketch Settings, select Shaded Sketch Contours. I'll deactivate it. And now, if I try to click and drag the sketch entities, notice I can't. I'll activate it again, this time by right-clicking anywhere in the graphics area, and under Recent Commands, I'll select Shaded Sketch Contours. If I click again to start a new chain of lines, I can end this chain by double-clicking. Alternatively, I can end the chain by right-clicking, and you can see End Chain here in the right-click menu with double-click in parentheses. Anytime there's a shortcut, SolidWorks will display it in the parentheses as you see here. So I'll click End Chain to end the chain of lines. Notice that as I created these first few chains, I began by clicking once, clicking again for the endpoint, and then clicking each endpoint and continuing. However, if you just want to create a single line, there's another way I could do this. Let me end this chain of lines by double-clicking. Now, instead of clicking and releasing, this time I'll click and hold down the mouse button and release it to create the next endpoint. When I do, you can see SolidWorks didn't create a chain of lines this time. It just created a single line segment. So, to sum up, using the click-click method, I can create a chain of lines while using double-click to end the chain. Or, I can click and hold the mouse button down to create just one line segment. Now let's get rid of all this geometry. To do this, all you have to do is select it and press Delete on the keyboard. However, notice that since the pointer is showing the pencil with the line next to it, SolidWorks is telling me that the Line tool is still active. In order to select geometry, I need to get back to my selection arrow. I can do this by hitting Escape on my keyboard, and I'm back to the selection arrow. The reason I point this out is that it can be easy to forget that you're still in Sketchline mode. And when you go to select geometry, you end up creating these little line segments instead of deleting the selected geometry. I'll press Escape again to get back to the selection arrow. And to delete geometry, all I have to do is select it and press Delete on the keyboard. I can also select multiple entities by holding down the Control key, and you can see each of the items are highlighted. With all three of these items highlighted, I can press Delete on the keyboard, and SolidWorks will delete all of them. Another convenient way to select multiple line segments is to use a box selection. All I have to do here is click anywhere in the graphics window and drag to create a box. Anything that's completely inside the box is going to be highlighted when I release the mouse button. And I can press Delete on the keyboard. Notice that when I select from left to right, SolidWorks is only going to include items that are completely inside of the selection window. If you've used AutoCAD in the past, this is very similar. When I release the mouse button, only these two lines are highlighted because they were the only two that were completely inside of the box. Let me press the Escape key to clear the selections. Alternatively, if I click and drag a box from right to left, anything that is touching this rectangle will be highlighted. So I can press Delete on the keyboard to delete these. To get back to a clean sketch, I'll just box select the rest of the lines and press Delete. Next, let's quickly go over the Rectangle tool. Notice next to the icon on the toolbar, there's actually a drop-down menu. There are quite a few different types of rectangles, but I'll only talk about the corner rectangle and the center rectangle in this lesson. Let's start with the corner rectangle. With the corner rectangle selected, you can see a rectangle icon appear next to my cursor. The two white dots on each corner of the rectangle indicate that this is going to be a corner rectangle. This one is really straightforward, but as you work with other rectangle tools and other sketch tools for that matter, it may not be quite as clear which selections you're supposed to make. If I switch to the center rectangle, notice that the first point I'll be selecting is the center, and the second point will define the size. So I'll click once where I want the center to be, and click again to create the rest of the rectangle. Again, to get rid of this geometry, I'll hit Escape on my keyboard, box select everything, and press Delete. One last sketch tool I'd like to go over here is the circle. Notice there's also a drop-down next to the circle icon for the circle and perimeter circle tools. You'll most likely be using the regular center point circle, so that's what I will be focusing on. If I click in space to sketch the center, I can click again to give the circle a radius. Pretty straightforward, right? Now, up to this point, I've been clicking anywhere in the graphics area to start my geometry, but it's a good idea to keep in mind where the origin is. Notice that if I activate the circle command again and hover over the origin, a small yellow flag appears next to my pointer. This yellow flag is what's called a geometric relation in SolidWorks, which tells me that the center point isn't only close to the origin, it's actually coincident, or in other words, directly on the origin. So, at this point, I'll click to begin the circle on the origin. Click again to give it a radius, and press Escape on my keyboard to deactivate the circle tool. Notice that a green flag appears at the center of the circle and the origin. This indicates that the center point of the circle has a geometric relation, so that it's locked to the origin. If I click and move these other circles, you can see that they're completely free to move in both location and size. However, if I try to move this circle, SolidWorks tells you it cannot be dragged and that the selected item is fixed. That's because of this geometric relation, which we'll talk about in the next lesson.